Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Squawk podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Horning. I'm here with Randy Bryan, Reginald Andre, and Ryan O'Hara, the usual suspects of the show. Welcome to the show, boys. Another week. It's the week of June 13th, just so you have a reference of time if you don't know when this was recorded and you're listening. So we're going to get into a lot. We're going to talk about a bunch of things today. How are you guys doing? Everything going good?
Good.
Yeah.
We're burning up down here in Texas. Oh, sorry, Andre. Go ahead.
Oh, no, just coming back from vacation. So glad to be back in South Florida.
I was just going to say we're burning up in Texas right now. It's been over 100 degrees like for a week.
Yeah, your heat wave's coming up here in a couple days.
Yeah, I mean, it's been this hot this early in the summer. We're going to probably have 100 days over 100 degrees, which is really hot. I'm good with anything up to like 95. And after that, I'm not sure, man.
Wow. All right. So glad you guys are doing well. We got a lot of talk about today, and Randy's got to cut us short in about 45 minutes here. So we'll try to fit all this into a good 45-minute show like we usually do. So we're going to talk about some ransomware stats from May. We're going to get into a ransomware attack on a Arizona hospital. Why paying the ransomware puts a bigger bullseye on your back. We're going to talk about this HelloXD ransomware and what they're up to and some tactics that we're seeing with that group. And then we're going to jump into a pretty big attack on a pretty popular project management, document sharing, document repository. If you're a user of Confluence, and you run your own server, you need to be patching your server if you don't know that. But we're going to talk about how widespread the attacks are against the vulnerability that exists within that server and what's happening around that at the end of the show. So before we jump into it, Randy, we're going to start charging for the show, right? So let everybody know what we're going to charge to listen to our show.
Yeah, our fee is not monetary right now. So that's good. Also, we don't have ads or sponsorships. The fee for the show is that you will like and comment on it whatever platform you're watching it or listening to it. But also, if you would, push that share button, copy the link, and take that link and go post it on Facebook, go post it on Twitter, wherever you do your social media, TikTok if you can. But bottom line, share, comment, and like, and that's what helps us get the word out, and that's our fee for the show.
He is right. So remember, pay the fee. We don't do this out of our goodness of our heart to not get this stuff out there to the people that need to know about it, right? So, all right. So May had some interesting. We're in this kind of the second week of June here. Cyber analysts are looking over what happened in May, and we're just going to kind of summarize what happened in May. Now, ransomware overall, the reported ransomware attacks are down. We should not take any feel good. We should not feel good about that because number one of the things that Ryan and I were talking about in the green room is how much longer it's actually taking for companies to come out and admit to this stuff. So, we might not hear about all the May attacks until almost well into July. That seems to be kind of the timeline now is like 4, 5, 6 weeks later, we're learning about companies that get hit with ransomware. So that's one thing. And we've also noted on this show multiple times that the release of this information seems to be getting slowed down significantly. And we attribute that to cyber insurance, lawyers who are breach coaches, usually in these events, getting smarter about how to handle these situations, right? If you're in the news, imagine the leverage an attacker has if your attack is in the news. When you're not in the news and it's not getting any press and not many people know about it, that's less leverage. So that's why we're starting to see this. In the early days of of ransomware, especially when the big payouts started to be asked for by these cyber criminals. We saw this thing hitting the news within 24 hours from companies, from internal leaks that were coming out, right? Because people didn't have incident response plans and they weren't testing them. And now we have companies that are doing this. So people are more aware that I don't run to the news. I don't answer questions. I don't run on social media and basically say I'm locked out of work, on Twitter and Reddit, where guys like me who study and research this stuff, this is where we find this information. So, keep that in mind as we go through this, because I don't think anybody should feel good that ransomware is down, in April and in May for 2 consecutive months, because there's a lot of reasons for this. That's just a couple of them. And we're going to talk about, what are some other reasons you guys are seeing as to why ransomware could be down in the month of May.
Well, I think to your point about the disclosures and people going through their attorneys now, we're also not seeing as much as we had been of the, version 1, version 2, version 3 of these stories, where not only were they getting in the news, but they were getting into the news multiple times. You had the first story where, yep, we had an incident, but nothing was hit. Then the second one, well, yeah, some data was hit, but not very much. And then, usually you get to the third and fourth version of the story where you find out how impactful it was. And we're not seeing those anymore. So I think they're starting to realize, there's a little bit of both. I think there's, hey, we need an incident response plan. We didn't have one before. That's why we just threw all this information out there. And 2, they're realizing, you don't want to be in the news that much. So maybe get out all of the details in one story and then move on, as opposed to having to have to keep updating and being in the news several times.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I remember the UHS hack specifically, because I remember how botched that was from a PR standpoint on a couple different levels. And I'm just, it just blows my mind, how bad that one was versus what we're seeing today. We're not really seeing those types of mistakes anymore, which is good. People are maturing and they're understanding that, this has to be handled a certain way if you want to survive it with, little damage. So I threw up here the Evil Corp, right? I wanted to kind of talk about this as one of the reasons why we're seeing a downtrend in May, right? Because this is what's happening kind of out there in the world. So I don't know who wants to pick up on talking about this, but Evil Corp is basically one of the largest ransomware groups out there. And they're kind of shifting. It's saying they're shifting to Lockbit ransomware to evade sanctions. So what does that mean? You're muted, dude.
Oh, embarrassing. Lockbit is a ransomware as a service. So basically, they realized you can do better working together. And so switching to ransomware as a service means they don't have to develop all that stuff in-house. They can use their skills for other things, like getting into the networks and, dealing with people trying to get into networks, all that stuff. And let Lockbit handle the ransomware, because it's ransomware as a service. It's basically like ransomware as a service is just when someone else handles all of it. They can even handle the negotiations. They can handle the money, collecting the money. So it takes a lot of the overhead off of the criminal organizations and basically puts it out as a service that someone else is taking care of.
Yeah. So Evil Corp used to have their own ransomware. Right. They were good. This was one of those kind of old school groups. They were good at getting in, and they had their own ransomware to deploy. So now they're just taking the we're good at getting in part, and then they're shifting, the ransomware to Lockbit because of sanctions. Because when companies go and pay, they're less likely to pay, or they're less likely to use the fact that, hey, look, if we pay you, we're going to end up breaking federal laws here in the U.S., and we're not willing to do that, in order to pay you. So to get around that, they're now, which is probably a Russian-based group that they were sending money to, they have moved that piece of it to another company. And that's why we wanted to talk about this, because it takes time to coordinate all this and to move all of this and for all of this to happen. And once they do kind of have this relationship and then they see it is working, look out. That's all I got to say, because these are the reasons we're seeing a downtrend. It's not because they stopped trying. It's not because they, businesses have all of a sudden caught up with cybersecurity and they're doing all the right things to prevent these things. Those are not the reasons, number one. These are the reasons. We're giving you them. There's movement going around with these groups, and they need to, it's going to take them time to get back to the point where they're, efficiently deploying ransomware on companies. It hasn't stopped. It's just gone down a little bit, but I don't think that trend is going to continue whatsoever. And that's kind of what we're here to kind of tell people and educate people on, is that these are the reasons that these things are happening. And I can think of one other reason why this is happening. I don't know if you guys have any other ideas that you want to share, but
mine was kind of along the same lines, because, we talked last week that there's so many government interactions here, the sanctions, like the article you just mentioned, and, them going after criminals and all that kind of stuff, that they're moving towards business email compromise, AKA BEC is what the cool kids call it. But basically there's other ways. That one's a little more personalized, and it might be more suited to some of these groups that are really good at getting in and manipulating people. But that's, just another reason right there. They're just following the money, and they're going to go where they can get the most money with the least amount of resistance.
One of the other things we talked about last week too was not only are they changing their methods, but they're also scaling down. So some of these really large groups are breaking out into smaller groups, and there's some time that it takes to do stuff like that as well.
It's a cat and mouse game, because whatever the mouse is getting caught over today, the mouse is going to change and get away. And so the cat's going to have to change. So the cat will start catching the mouse. So the mouse got to change again. It's just going to go back and forth, until we are done talking about this, whenever that is.
Never.
So.
Never.
Also, too, what the first article talked about data collected. And as we talked about, a lot of times the way you collect data about a ransomware is via the news. So now that less people are talking about it, it's not like if you did get a ransom where you're going to your FBI office or you're calling the local police, where they're taking these statistics and then making it public. So yeah, data collected is because you're looking at the news just like everybody else, and because it's less news, therefore the statistics show that it's less, but it's not really. It's just you're not talking about it.
Yep. And the public sector, municipal governments were one of the largest, most affected by ransomware, sectors out there. I know we covered the one in Somerset County, New Jersey on the show, but there was a bunch more. I even know of ones in my area that never even made the news for the most part. Pretty sure that happened. If it wasn't in late April, it was in May. And then IT is another big group. IT companies are another big one that's being attacked. I know that there was a large web hosting company out in Oregon that was attacked, and it ended up affecting like that Ruby receptionist service because they couldn't answer phones or look up customer information because they used this company that got hit. And then the agricultural industry, for some reason, is also a major target along with healthcare. So we're going to jump into kind of that right now because we have another hospital. It seems like hospitals just like, it's tough for hospitals, right? It's hard for them to keep that hush hush when they get hit, right? So unlike, an accounting firm, they're not really providing a massive public service, right?
They've got the similar problem to the manufacturing vertical is they've got a lot of equipment that's computer driven that
right.
You can't just replace the operating system without replacing the entire piece of machinery or piece of equipment that they're using.
Yeah, plus I also look at it like you have the public can just walk in the door of the ER, right? And people are going to tell them like we can't even check you in right now because our systems are down because we got hit with ransomware. And that's kind of how unfortunately, hospitals have to kind of deal with this. It doesn't take long for one patient to find out before, somebody's calling the news, and now you have it in, the news. So, Andre, what's going on at this hospital out in Arizona?
Yep. So we have Yuma Regional Medical Center based in Arizona. They are reporting to their patients that between April 21st and 25th of this year, and keyword, prior to file encryption, a subset of files were taken from their systems, including names, social security numbers, health insurance information, and limited medical information of current and former patients. So now they're saying, of course, we're taking steps to improve our security now that we've been attacked, and we'll provide complimentary credit monitoring to anybody that we sent this list to. So going back to that keyword, prior to file encryption. So again, they're holding information, plain text, where if someone gets into their system, it seems that they're just leaving their patient information just out there without any type of encryption, which is horrible for a hospital.
Yeah, I mean this is kind of why I wanted to talk about this particular incident, is because I know we say this on the show a lot, that attackers can be in there for hundreds of days. 200, I think the average is like a couple hundred days. I know it's getting shorter and shorter because they're getting more efficient at what they do, but you could have somebody in there stealing data, moving it to a cloud sharing service, moving it to their own servers for months, before they deploy ransomware. Ransomware is the last thing that happens in these types of events. It's because they know they're going to get caught, or they are looking for 10 other ways to make money off of your data before they decide to deploy ransomware. And I want to make sure that people understand that when cyber criminals get in your network, the first thing they're looking to do is see how big of a footprint that they can get a hold of, because the more computers that they can encrypt, the more they're likely to get in a ransom demand. But in the process of going through and figuring out, can I get the 10 computers? Can I get control of 20? Can I get control of 100? Can I get control of 1,000? In that process, they're looking for things that they can exploit along the way. And that's how this goes down. I think a lot of people think that somebody breaks in and 10 minutes later they deploy ransomware, and that's not at all what happens. Anything else you guys want to add on this one?
Goes back to so this article is from today, and it's a disclosure from late April. So going back to our first discussion about May not having as much, that remains to be seen still at this point.
Yep. So it's 700,000 patient records were exposed, right? Is that accurate? So I mean, that's going to be a pretty. Those of you out there who are not afraid of HIPAA, we're going to find out in probably 6 months to a year how bad HIPAA is going to come down on Yuma.
Yeah.
Especially if they weren't encrypted, right?
And I just want to throw out there, credit monitoring is kind of a joke as a given somebody this because their data was leaked. I mean, I understand having credit monitoring is an important thing, but it doesn't really help what happened.
No. All right, man. So Randy, we're gonna keep the ball in your court right now. So we got ransomware paints a bigger bullseye on targets back from this article on Threat Post.
Yeah. So, sorry.
Go ahead. I said, go ahead. I was gonna say, what's going on here? Like, what does this mean?
Well, so basically, it's saying that there is a large number of people, of companies that are getting re-attacked after they are hit the first time. There's a couple statistics at play here. We know that over 25% of all businesses that are attacked with a ransomware do nothing. They do nothing whatsoever. And so, other than probably, the boss, sticking their head into the door and saying, don't click on those emails anymore, or however the ransomware got in. We also know that 80% of all businesses that get attacked in the first place with a ransomware are going to get it again. And that's what this article goes into. The crazy thing, though, is you're looking at numbers in the 50%. So 68% are hit again within the same month, and 50% are hit again within the next week. And they're talking about how they're getting attacked by the same. This was basically a survey of almost 1,500 people that businesses that had been attacked. But they're talking about how it's the same people, the same organizations that hacked them the first time. They pay the money, are coming back and hacking them again. And they're also talking about how a lot of times they're losing data in the decryption process, or they don't really ever get it all back. We know that the number is only like a third that get all their data back anyway. So bottom line is, I mean, this to me is the article that the criminals don't want us to talk about, because if people knew that they're most likely going to get hit again by the same exact people, they wouldn't pay the ransomware in the first place. 5 years ago, I don't think this was as prevalent of re-hitting the same thing, but now they're doing it. Like I said, 50% are within a week. They're getting re-hit by the same people, like right again. So
I think it was prevalent. I don't think it's gone down. I think cyber criminals realize that they can do it again. That's what it is.
Get away with it, right?
They realize. So and I'm going to talk a little bit about like why this is happening, because Randy said, I forget what you just said right there. You said that this is the article that cyber criminals don't want us to talk about. And I say
Right.
It's also the article that businesses don't want us talking about, because this tells you how crappy businesses' cybersecurity is. And what I'm talking about here is right of boom stuff, their incident response, right? So here's how I've seen this play out at businesses, right? They get hit with ransomware. They pay to get the decryption, right? And the decryption maybe gets back, let's say 70% of the files, maybe 80. Maybe they got lucky and they got 90%, but they're not getting it all back. You're not getting all your data back when you pay these guys, because their decryptors, their software sucks, right? So what do you have to do? You have to then go to backups, right? And most companies, this is where they make the mistake. They restore back to the original system with the original stuff. They just go right back. So they're getting bad advice from whoever's advising them or whoever's doing their IT. They have no idea how to do this properly. They're not bringing in cybersecurity professionals who will sit there and say, you got to bring in new equipment. You got to, wipe these machines clean. These are things that are really drastic, really extreme, and are going to cost the business money and downtime. But incident response is expensive, folks. If you get hit with ransomware and you're looking for the cheapest way out of it, you're probably going to end up as an example of this article, which is getting hit again. That's how I've seen it happen 1,000 times. People just think that they can restore from backups to the same systems without doing anything, like, hey, we're back up and running. And then 2 weeks later, boom, they're in the same situation they were in with a bigger ransom demand.
And if you think about it, these numbers are actually probably higher than they're listed, because it also doesn't talk about, there's definitely a percentage of those businesses that were hit 1 or 2 times that weren't able to be hit again because they went out of business.
Or they were probably hit again and then they went business. But yeah, they try to come back up, right? It seems like they always try to come back up, at least limp up a little bit. And then, it could be days, it could be a week or two, but it's not very long. And they come back and get hit again. So anything else interesting you guys want to talk about in this article? Andre, you got anything there?
One other thing is that we're not talking about after the remediation, like how did they get in? Are you patching the systems? A lot of times when you need to put in these tools, it needs to kind of like that learning mode for 2 weeks to kind of like learn the systems before you lock down the systems. So even when you're trying to remediate or you're changing out the computers, it's so important to know that it's going to take a long time to recover your data. And while you're recovering the data, the hackers can go right back in.
Yeah. If you don't get the underlying problem solved of how they got back in, and you don't know how they got back in because you didn't have the telemetry, they're probably going to get back in.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the telemetry, you need to stand up all new systems that have never been touched by anybody before, and then make sure you're putting in the proper security at that point. So
Yeah, that's why you don't want to turn it off. You want to isolate it and try to leave it on, so that way a professional can come in and look and figure out how it got infected in the first place. What was their main way in, so then that way you can mitigate that when you come back and block it.
yeah, but if you don't have the proper things turned on, which a lot of the things that an incident responder is going to need are things that people typically don't know to turn on. And I'm talking about MSPs, IT professionals that are out there that don't know how to go in and turn on advanced logging on certain things like Windows servers or file shares or things like that. And when these things aren't turned on, you're pretty much in the same boat as if you didn't have it in the first place,
Right.
because you just got to come in, you got to wipe everything because you don't have the ability to look at and say, okay, this is exactly what happened. And a lot of times people also don't realize that Windows logs on systems, especially if you have an organization with like more than 10 people, those logs don't last very long if you don't send them somewhere else, to be stored. If you go over to the server, you might have a day or two of logs if you're lucky. And a lot of times that's not enough. So, all right. So we're going to move into another topic here, guys. And that is this HelloXD ransomware. And Ryan, you're going to run point on this one. What is HelloXD ransomware and what are they doing?
So this one's interesting to me. So this is kind of a good example of an up and comer. So showing the process of how they establish themselves. So this is a particular group that was first observed in November, and they have been adding, critiquing, adapting their processes. Recently, adding a new backdoor process to help them navigate the compromised system and exfiltrate files. So not very long, November 2021. Not a whole lot of in the wild evidence yet for these, but it's a group that's being tracked. To me, it just shows how easy it is for these groups to kind of even get started. So we've got the larger groups that are breaking up into smaller groups, and now we've got these smaller groups that are kind of establishing themselves as well. But just showing how they go through the process of pushing something out there, testing. I mean, it's no different than software development. If you think about it, legitimate software development, you have your product, you push it out, you test it, you learn from it, you adapt, and then you push out the next version. And really, that's what we're seeing right here. So it's really interesting to me to see how much this mirrors what happens in legitimate business as well.
Yep. So I look at this from a macro level too. Is they're also studying, previous attacks and what has happened in previous attacks. Very much like Randy said earlier in the show with this cat and mouse game, right? This is the cat and mouse game. They're the mouse, and they're trying to figure out what the cat's doing, right? So the cat in this situation is they know that incident response is not a strong suit, right? So cyber security, money, and resources are being poured into the defensive side, like preventing that ransomware attack from happening in the first place. But what activity like this tells us is that they're looking at the data and they're saying, man, if we can hit somebody once, we can hit them again. So if we can drop ransomware, but right before we drop ransomware, we get a backdoor in, there's a very good chance that they're going to recover back to the system or put that backdoor back into a system that we can then use later on to hit them again. And that's literally like if we get it in once, we need to make sure that we can try to get in again. Like that's almost like going to be built in now to ransomware. Like backdoors are going to be dropped in. So if you're not doing what we talked about in the last segment, which is wiping everything and starting anew, you're almost guaranteed at this point with this kind of stuff being developed to get hit again. Right?
Absolutely.
I'm shaking my head because the article says that they're using a open source backdoor called Micro Backdoor, which just to me is disconcerting from the fact of you would think that those infected systems would catch that getting installed on the machines somehow or put on the machines, since it's an open source, well-known backdoor, if you will. So anyway,
Just
can't stop
depends
shaking my head about that.
Depends on what it does and how it evades the AV. I mean,
Right.
You know, but chances are if you didn't have these layers of defense in the first time when they got in, the chances are you're not going to have them to detect this. So, Andre, you got anything you want to add on this? Is this kind of like make your hair stand up on the back of your neck, knowing that, you know, they're looking at the operations of companies and how they're defending, and they're like, look, here's a major incident response is a major shortfall for a lot of companies. Like it's that piece of cybersecurity that's kind of like step 7 or 8, and most businesses are still trying to deal with step 1 and 2. And that's why the hackers are ahead of the game. It's like, okay, you're still trying to figure out how to make your employees not click on stuff and not get infected with ransomware at the endpoint level. And we're over here looking at how you're responding to ransomware attacks. And we know that, you know, if we can get in once, we can get in again.
Yeah, extremely scary. And hopefully this, again, people listening, you know, this is why it's so important to take this seriously. They're so ahead of us meaning the ones that, you know, are not doing what you should be doing.
Right. We know what needs to be done. It's just businesses don't, you know, and there's a long road to hoe here with educating businesses on everything that needs to be done here, because I would venture to say if I had 100 CEOs in a room and I, you know, said, you know, help me understand what a ransomware attack looks like in your business, you know, I think I would get very much similar to what I talked about, which is, hey, they get in, they encrypt our data and you know, we pay the ransom and we move on. It's like, no, that's not even close to what's going on here. So, all right, so I'm going to jump into our last topic that we found today for this Confluence servers. And the Confluence servers are interesting to me because this isn't the first time that this platform has had vulnerabilities. But they are now using Confluence servers vulnerabilities to deploy Avos Locker and Cerber 2021 ransomware. Again, this is that list that the government has. It says like these are the 15 most, you know, exploited vulnerabilities that we know about that are out there in the wild right now. This is one of them. Confluence is a platform where you can collaborate and share documents, files, things like that, project management type stuff. But they offer two very distinct flavors of their product. One is a hosted product that you can just go on and buy, and they host it and they take care of the security and the patching and the updating of that server. Or you can buy a license and run it on your own cloud server. And a lot of companies, for some reason, they like to do this. And they like to kind of take the responsibility of cybersecurity in their own house or of updating. And that's the thing that I think where a lot of businesses get things wrong when it comes to IT and cybersecurity is like, oh, well, it costs this much per month. Let's just say it's $100 per user per month to use Confluence, where they take care of all that stuff for you. And then let's say it's $25 a user per month. If it's, you know, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just a one-time fee and you can have unlimited users. And that looks so much more attractive. Oh, we just pay a one-time fee and we can get, you know, our 1,000 employees on this system without, you know, paying $100 per user. We're going to do that. And we're going to have, you know, our IT team, you know, stand up a server and manage it and run it. And that's where they get it wrong. They look at it and they don't look at the man hours it's going to take for the internal IT team to manage that server and keep it up to date and make sure it's backed up and all the things that you need to make sure that happen. and that gets lost, and they end up making decisions to do this, right? And then what ends up happening, we end up in this situation. This isn't just with Confluence. This is anything that you're running internally. This could be a Microsoft Exchange server, as we well know that there's vulnerabilities around that. So anything that you're running that's a server, whether it's exposed to the internet or not, you have more of a risk if it is. But you have these servers that are out there that your team is responsible for doing, and this proves that it's not getting done. These Confluence servers are not being patched. They're out there exposed with active vulnerabilities that allow cyber attackers to take control of these servers and get in God mode. And then that allows them to then deploy ransomware to anybody who now visits the site once it's infected. So this could be internal users or external users. So it's a big deal. But again, this isn't just picking on Confluence. This I'm picking on companies that decide it's cheaper for us to just buy a license and run it on our own server with our own internal IT team. Well, guess what? Your internal IT team isn't updating it, and it's leaving your business at risk.
It's not just cost. I mean, that's a big factor too. But another thing I hear a lot, just from regular businesses, but even IT organizations, I want to have control of my data. I don't want it in somebody else's cloud environment. I want it in my environment.
That is true as well. Yeah.
But then you look at these stories, and it's almost always, the cloud service that particular company runs was not impacted because it was up to date, and they were able to take it offline as soon as they knew right about it. It's almost always the people who roll their own server and try and manage it themselves. So, whether it's not having right processes in place or thinking, I'm not going to update this right away. I want to see if it breaks something else, that kind of thing. It's almost always the people who are trying to manage their own server, not the company's cloud services that are exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, or you can even have something where you have the legacy people. Oh, we used to use Confluence. Now we went to SharePoint. But for our archive and, once in a while we need to go back in and check something, but it's fully online. Nobody's paying attention to it, but it is online. And then this is another way for them to get in.
And that's how a lot of the big attacks that we've seen over the last couple of years have been. It's been something old that is not being used anymore that's still sitting out there exposed, but nobody's paying attention to it.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time. If you don't have security professionals in your organization, you just have an IT department, they're really not thinking about security like they should. Their job is to get it working and running so your business can operate and can use the tool. They're not really thinking about security. And depending on your organization, your IT people are probably stretched thin as it is. So to pile things like security or patch management on top of what they do on a daily basis, you could find yourself in a situation, and we see this a lot with companies, is that their IT team is stretched so thin. There's only so many hours in the day that this stuff just doesn't get done. I've also seen it where companies don't even plan for this stuff. They don't even, it's not on their radar that these things need to be done on a regular basis. And, those are the scenarios that I see. So scary, guys. I don't know. We got to step it up, but these are all the things that people need to realize. And I think, not to toot our own horn, but as businesses move along here, they're going to see that trying to do all this internally is really, really hard unless you have a significant IT department, So I would venture to say that if you're a company between 100 and 500 employees, you're probably in that situation where you need some kind of outsourced security to come in and help your organization. Like to think that your team that you currently have can handle this and do this. I think you're introducing some risk in your business that you might not realize is there because, the guys that are working in the IT department are not going to come to you and tell you that this stuff isn't getting done. In fact, they're going to tell you it probably is getting done because they're worried about losing their job. So these are the things we're seeing out there. Just be aware. So,
and if you want to think about it in a different way too, to really drive it home, is the bad guys are doing this, right? The bad guys are outsourcing different components of what they're doing in order to be able to manage that. So like to level the playing field, you need to make sure that you have specialists and professionals doing these different layers. You can't just depend on the people who have been doing support and mapping printers for you to be able to do this next level type of stuff.
Yeah, setting up networks. It's the difference between getting the baby there and getting the baby there safely, right? Cybersecurity professionals are worried about getting the baby there safely. IT people are just worried about getting the baby there. So if that means strapping the kid on your back and riding them on the motorcycle with no helmet, so be it, right? It works. High five, woohoo, right? But no, a cybersecurity professional is going to come in with a different perspective. And in my experience, the person who's really good at setting up that network is probably doesn't have the right personality and is not the right fit to be doing the security. That's just my experience. There are two different types of personality sets that you want for those roles. So trying to force the network infrastructure guy into security is not the greatest idea.
Yeah.
He might be that person might be a great person. They might be your superstar IT, who's been with you for many, many years. It doesn't mean, it's the same conversation you have in sales, right? Your best salesperson might not be the best sales manager. It's a totally different skill set, right? And that's how you need to think about this, because I think a lot of people miss the fact, especially in IT, that not all IT people are created equal and we can't do everything, right? I think that's one of the big things, is that when you see an IT guy, people look at him and go, well, they can do anything on a computer. And that's not the case anymore. It's not 1998. And that's just the reality. So, I used to have people tell me back in the day, guys, that our field was going to be obsolete because everybody's going to, be born with computers. So they're automatically going to know how to run them and work them. And, we're not going to need IT guys, in the future. And it's like, we talked about this before. There's people that know how to drive cars and there's people that know how to fix them. Right. And that's,
and now your car needs cybersecurity too, because it's all computerized. That's the problem. There's a lot of people who know how to use computers now.
I know a mechanic that can secure your car.
Yeah.
So, all right, guys. Thank you. Good show. Good topics. Good information. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Make sure you share. Get this information.
Share the show. We're coming after you. So, all right, guys. Look for us on your podcasting platform. We're going to try to post these videos around the same time, the videos along with the audio. And make sure you download us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And we'll see you in the next episode. Take care, everyone.
All right.
Have a good one.